Braid is here with the Garden of English today, and what I want to cover with you all is integrating textual evidence in your answers. Now, this is not a um, video that's only for AP Lang or only for AP Lit. This is about integrating textual evidence in general. Now, the most common problems that I typically run into when having my students integrate textual evidence for the first time is I have students that at the onset want to write their pieces and then just integrate a line, put the line in as its own sentence, and then move on. That's the first problem that I see. The second problem that I see is I have students a lot of times say in the text it says or in the text it states, and that's not going to cut it. And the last problem that I typically see is that I have students that take probably 3 to 5 sentences at a time from the text and drop that all in their paragraph and then try to continue writing on after. All three of those problems are extremely common. If you realize that you are a person that does one of those three things, well, today is the day that you need to change. Now, because this video is not only for AP Lit or only for AP Lang, what I've done here is I have an example of a literary example of how to integrate textual evidence, and I have a rhetoric example for rhetorical analysis of how to integrate textual evidence, and I'll deal with how to do it in argument and synthesis and like research papers in a different video when I focus on that in particular, because we need to talk about putting sources in conversation, not for today. But I'm going to shrink myself up here, and we're going to look at the content for today. Let's try to make sure I stay in the screen here. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Romeo and Juliet for my examples from literature, and then I'm going to use an article called "He Showed Us the Way" by Cesar Chavez, which showed up in Maryknoll magazine. Now, this was also on the 2015 AP language exam, but there was only an excerpt from the article, and here I have a link to the whole thing. So we're not actually using the AP Lang exam, but we're using an excerpt from something that was on the AP Lang exam. Anyway, like I said, we're going to use Romeo and Juliet here for literature, and I want to just talk about textual evidence in a paragraph. When you're paragraphing, textual evidence is going to come after a solid topic sentence, and you want your topic sentence to point you as the writer and the reader as well to the text that you're going to use as your evidence. So typically a way a paragraph will be set up will be topic sentence, evidence, and then some sort of commentary. It typically follows some pattern of that. Some pattern like that. But if you look at this topic sentence from my literary example, this is going to tell us exactly where we need to pull our textual evidence from, because it'll be nice and concrete, and it will tell us what we have to connect it to in terms of abstraction. So we have in Act 1, Scene 5 of Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare presents Tybalt's outrage during the Capulet party, which displays his aggressively violent yet loyal nature. Now, we need to find textual evidence here of Tybalt's outrage during the Capulet party. That's going to be the concrete element that we're searching for. So I'll make that nice and red. That's going to be the quotes that we have to find have to relate to Tybalt being outraged at a party. However, this textual evidence or these quotes that we're going to pull also have to show Tybalt as being aggressively violent and extremely loyal. So I'm going to paint that a nice little blue color here. Okay. So we need to make sure that our textual evidence is going to be concrete enough to fit with what's highlighted in red and abstract enough to also allow us to explain how it relates to the blue. Okay? So if you click on this link right here, it will bring you to Act 1, Scene 5 of Romeo and Juliet. I'm not going to do that right now with you all for the sake of time. I'm going to just scroll down and show you the text that I found from Act 1, Scene 5 that will allow you to see Tybalt acting violently and yet loyally at the party. And it comes from different sections here, okay? So the first line that Tybalt delivers is, "Fetch me my rapier, boy. What dares the slave come hither, covered with an antic face, to fleer and scorn at our solemnity? Now, by the stock and honor of my kin, to strike him dead, I hold it not a sin." And this is at the moment when Tybalt realizes that a Montague has crashed the party because Romeo spoke out loud and he recognized Romeo's voice. And now Tybalt is extremely upset, and he tells his servant, "I need to go get my sword. This is going to become, something vicious." Okay, and then further on, Tybalt finds Capulet, or he walks past Capulet, and Capulet asks him, "Why are you so upset, Tybalt? This is my party. You should be having a better time." And Capulet says, "Because a Montague crashed our party." Sorry, Tybalt says, "Because a Montague crashed our party." And Capulet tells him to lay off, but he doesn't want to. Tybalt doesn't want to because of how much he views the Montagues as a foe. And I was like, wow, that shows Tybalt's loyalty, so I put that in here. Okay, so I found this text. He's a Montague, our foe. And the last line is, "It fits when such a villain is a guest. I'll not endure him." And this is Tybalt throwing his fit after Capulet tells him to calm down. He's like, "No, I don't want to have to endure having a Montague here." So we see Tybalt still being angry about it, still being insulted, and he's insulted because he feels like his family's been trespassed, and that shows the loyalty there. Now, if we had the problem with just dropping quotes in, if I had students write a topic sentence that talk about Tybalt's outrage at the party, showing he's aggressively violent and loyal in nature, student who deals with the first violation of just dropping quotes in is going to just drop all of this in, and that's not going to make any sense. So we have a strong topic sentence, and then all of a sudden I just am reading lines from the text. There's nothing in between, so I'm like, wait a second, that jumped. Who's he responding to as he is a Montague, our foe, and it fits? It doesn't work, okay? But this is indeed all of the textual evidence that I need to include in my paper, so we need to figure out how to do that, okay? But you'll notice that there are multiple lines here, and we want to recognize that. So we're going to talk about what 3 ways that we can get to get this into our paper and have it sound excellent, okay? So that's the literary side of things. For the rhetoric side of things, we're going to switch gears just a moment, and I'm going to talk about Chavez here. So we've got Cesar Chavez, and if I should have probably put his first name here, Cesar Chavez. One of the things that he does in his piece, in this piece from Rocky Knoll, is he's arguing that there's power in nonviolence and that it's morally better to protest nonviolently. So one of the things that he does is he reminds his farm workers about the sanctity of life. And you'll see that right here. So we have Cesar Chavez reminds those involved with the farm workers movement about the sanctity of life. And this right here is going to be red for me. And the reason why is because this is our concrete. And it says, in order to showcase the overall greater moral stance of nonviolent action. And I'm going to highlight this one right here in blue. Now, the reason why I did that, of course, is because now my textual evidence needs to be when he reminds the people that are involved in the farm workers movement about the sanctity of life. And I just need to make sure that I can actually connect that to how that shows that nonviolence is a greater moral stance. It's a greater course of action. Okay? And you'll notice if I go down here, I have this whole line from Chavez. It says, our conviction is that human life is a very special possession given by God to man, and that no one has the right to take it for any reason or for any cause, however just it may be. And you'll notice that this textual evidence right here correlates directly with what's in red, so I have picked the best textual evidence for what we're trying to talk about. The only thing is that I can't just drop this quote in. I also don't want to say, in the text it says, and then just leave this quote there. That's good. This quote is too long for that. And to just say in the text it says, well, let's actually think about this for a minute. I've got a text right here, okay? Can you all hear that? Yeah, neither can I. And the reason why is because texts don't actually say anything. And they don't have a voice box. They don't have a brain. Come on, folks, right? We can't say in the text it says. So what do we do? Well, there are 3 steps that we want to take in order to actually navigate how to integrate textual evidence. The first one, the first way that I teach this to my students, and this comes from a good friend of mine named Mike Van Walde, right, is to compare textual evidence and textual evidence integration with creating a tuna fish sandwich. And the reason why is because in tuna fish, right, we have a can of tuna, and inside of that can of tuna we have the meat and we have water or oil if we're in Europe, okay? And we also have our bread. Now, if I were to open up my can of tuna and put it on my bread, what would actually happen? Well, the oil and the meat would all go onto my bread, and I would actually end up having a soggy tuna fish sandwich, which is disgusting. And so because of that, you don't ever want your writing to be compared to a soggy tuna fish sandwich. However, if you have long quotes and you put those in your paragraphs, that is just like taking open your tuna fish can, putting it on your bread, and then sure enough, it's like having a soggy tuna fish sandwich. So we don't want that. We don't want our writing ever to be compared like that. So what do we have to do with our writing? We have to do the exact same thing that we do with a can of tuna. We open that can and we drain all of what we don't need. And not only do we drain all of what we don't need, we only take what we do need. So there might even be some meat left over, but we only want enough meat to satisfy all that we need. Well, what does that actually mean for us? Well, if I go up to my topic sentence here and I look at this one about Tybalt, I know that I need to find text that shows Tybalt's outraged at the Capulet party, but I need to look for the language that shows that he's being aggressively violent and extremely loyal. So if I were to look at my first long quote here and I want to drain it for only the meat, I just have to go in and say what parts are the ones that are going to help me really explain how it shows he's aggressive and loyal. And you'll look here, I'm going to cross out everything that does not tie to being aggressive and or loyal. So I first have, or violent, by the way, I forgot about that one. But I have, fetch me my rapier. Yeah, that's going to help me with the violent side of things, because the first thing he thinks about is go get my sword, because someone has come in here, right? Next, as I keep reading, I'm like, okay, that this stuff that I crossed out doesn't really have much to do with Tybalt being aggressive or violent. However, I get to here and it says to strike him dead. I hold it not a sin. And sure enough, this last part here shows him being rather violent as well, and indeed aggressive. He doesn't even think that it's wrong. So I'm like, good, we want to keep that. The language that says this is a Montague, our foe, that helps us right here. Because that shows that he wants to stick with the Capulets, so he realizes that he needs to be loyal to them. And then with the last line, the only thing that I have to remember, or that's going to help us realize that he's aggressive and loyal and violent, or any one of those characteristics, is when it says, I'll not endure him. When it says it fits when such a villain is a guest, that has nothing to do with him being violent. So because of that, I'm not going to put that in my paper. So I'm draining out all that I don't need and only keeping that meat that I do need so that I can have a perfectly balanced tuna sandwich here. Um, and I will only be including the language that fits with my topic sentence, so I don't have to have all of this extra stuff, which is going to make it seem like a soggy, gross tuna sandwich. And just think about how that would smell and look, and oh, no, thank you. Anyway, so that's how this works. I would get my evidence, I'd cross out everything that does not tie to what's abstract here, and that's what's listed in blue. And then I'm going to say, okay, everything that I haven't crossed out is what I have to get into my paper. Now, for the Chavez piece, which would be the rhetorical one, right, I have to say what language is going to help me understand that there's a greater moral value in nonviolent action. So if you look at my Chavez line, what I'll do here is I will just drain out what I don't need. I don't need it to say our conviction, because I need to clarify who that our is anyway. The conviction is that human life is a very special possession given by God. I don't need the word very here. Okay, I don't need the two man and that, and I don't need for any reason or for any cause, however just it may be. I can get rid of this here because I just want to know what stands with morality. Conviction, human life, special possession given by God. No one has the right to take it, however just it may be. Okay? And all of these parts stand with the greater moral value of nonviolence. The rest of it is just added language. It's needed in the original text, just like that water is needed in the can in order to preserve the tuna fish in there. But once we open it up and mix it with the bread, we don't need all of it. And it's the same with our writing. We don't need all of it. Okay? So we're going to drain out everything that does not tie directly to what's in blue in our topic sentences. Okay? Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually integrate this text into our language. Proper quote integration is done in a way where I tell my students they need to channel one of their inner Disney princesses, and that is Elsa. And the reason why is because Elsa sings that ridiculously famous song, Let It Flow. Okay? In fact, I've sung this so much in my classroom that my kids have even put my face on the body of Elsa. It is quite ridiculous. I think you can see a picture of it here. Okay, I know it's gross, but nonetheless, right? The song is "Let It Flow" in the Garden of English, and I want you to adopt that too. Well, what does that mean? It means that you're going to be able to read your language, flow into the quote, and go back to your language, and you could tell you've done this right when you can't tell where your words end and the text begins. Okay? Now, how do you do that? The easiest way to do so is this. I have my students, when they first start doing this, right, take for example how as they begin to start their quote. And then what they have to do is they have to provide the context that surrounds the language that they're going to put in. So that means that they're going to summarize what happened before the language that they're going to put in, and sometimes they're going to have to provide some summary of what's happening in between to fill in the gaps that we cut out, because this stuff we cut out makes no sense. Okay, so if we have this piece about Tybalt, who's violent and aggressive, and I start my piece, take for example how, notice what happens here. While reveling at a Capulet feast, that's what happened before, so we've got context. Tybalt overhears Romeo commenting on an unidentified woman's beauty. In response to this discovery, Tybalt directs his servant to fetch him his rapier, as he contemplates how if he were to strike Romeo dead, it would be not a sin. Now you'll notice in here, I've got summary of what happened before the quote. I then have a summary intermixed, and my language is in black here, to actually connect my quote together. And this flows beautifully, and this is sophisticated quote integration. Okay? So we want to recognize that, and I do apologize for having my face covering that, right? So we have the context here. Now you'll also notice though that I have take for example how crossed out. That's a discourse marker that reminds my students who are beginning to paragraph that an example has to come after a topic sentence. Okay? Once you can do that consistently, you can actually cross this language out. And the reason why is because if you were to start reading it right here, while reveling at a Capulet feast, Tybalt overhears Romeo commenting on an unidentified woman's beauty, it makes perfect sense. You don't actually need the discourse marker. That is just for kids to begin to help them to remember, I have to put an example here, and I have to channel my inner Elsa and let it flow. Okay? Now, after this quote integration, students would talk about how this shows his aggressive nature and his loyal nature. And once they explain that, they would then introduce their next bits of textual evidence. And this right here is an example of that. But I'm not going to go over that in this video because you could see the first integration of textual evidence here. So topic sentence, this bit of evidence, how does this show him as being aggressively violent? And then move into the next piece of evidence that shows it, and then a further commentary on how this shows he's aggressively violent. I'll do another video about commentary later. Let's go back, though, and look at the Chavez topic sentence again, though, because now we have, he reminds those involved with the farm workers movement about the sanctity of life in order to showcase the overall greater moral stance of nonviolent action. We chose our evidence, but we drained it out, right? We got to only our meat. And now, here's how this will look. Take, for example, how after reflecting on the positive ethical character of Dr. King, so what happened before in this piece, he was talking about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his positive ethical character. It says Chavez describes how his and his followers' conviction mandates that every human life is a special possession given by God. So no one has the right to take it, no matter how just the reasoning may be. And you'll notice in here, I just made it flow with my own words, summarizing the context, picking little snippets of language, little bits of meat to incorporate. Sometimes I will take out words by actually putting my words in, but you'll notice that I only took out one word here, so I used a little ellipsis. Whenever you change anything in a quote, as long as you're not changing the meaning of the quote, you're going to put whatever changes in inside brackets, okay? But this flows perfectly. You can't tell when my words end and the text begins, besides the fact that there are quotation marks. So we have purposefully and excellently integrated our textual evidence here. We have indeed let it flow. And so down here we have a final look at what this would look like if we had our topic sentence. Oh, by the way, I could actually get rid of this take, for example, how, and this, it would all still make sense. But you'll have a final look at how all of this works. Please remember there will be two bits of textual evidence in my Tybalt paragraph. So I would have commentary in here, and then I'd move to my next piece of evidence and finish with some commentary. This paragraph only has one piece of evidence here. Now, I would like to talk about adding evidence in one more way. So the first way that you want to think about adding textual evidence into your work is by considering tuna fish sandwiches, right? Drain the water, only get the meat, only get what you need so that we can have a delicious sandwich to snack on. That's what we want as English teachers, your papers to read like, right? A delicious, filling meal because it's so perfectly balanced, okay? With the right amount of bread and the right amount of tuna. Now, the second way that you want to remember to integrate textual evidence is by channeling that inner Disney princess and letting it flow. The last one is by an analogy that I use, which is a visit from your foreign friend named Dogmar. And once again, this came from Mike Von Walde too. And trust me, Dogmar is ridiculously cool. You can see what he looks like here. Interestingly enough, that picture of Dogmar looks incredibly like Mike Von Walde as well. That's how cool he actually is. But anyway, imagine you were going to a friend's house for a party, and you were definitely going to go. It was the most popular kid in school, and you got home from school, and who was sitting on your front step but your best friend that you haven't seen in about 5 years from a foreign country named Dogmar. And you get out of the bus, and you're like, "Oh my word, Dogmar, what are you doing here?" And he's like, "Well, I'm only here until midnight, and then I have to leave. In fact, if I even leave at midnight, my carriage is going to turn into a pumpkin." So you now have a choice, right? And that choice is, do you go to the party alone or do you bring Dogmar? Now the problem is that if you bring Dogmar, he's not necessarily invited, okay? And he's actually quite foreign. But you decide, I need to hang out with my best friend and I have to go to that party. So when you bring Dogmar, you get there and you have two more choices. The first choice is this. Dogmar's kind of shy. He's totally awesome. Once he's comfortable, he'll actually, go around and talk to people. But until then, he's going to be kind of to himself. So if you don't introduce Dogmar to your friends, he's going to stand in the corner and look awfully foreign. This is exactly what happens when you just drop quotes in your paper. They look foreign, they look like they don't fit, and it makes you look like a weirdo for bringing the weird guy in the corner. You don't want that. You want to look cool. So what you end up doing, right, is you bring Dogmar in, but you don't just say, "Okay, Dogmar, talk," right? So Dogmar says, "No, no, 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 no." You tell people why you brought Dogmar to a party uninvited, and you give them the context or the background which brought them there. And then because people understand why Dogmar is actually at the party, they're like, "Oh, okay, I get why you're here. Why don't we let Dogmar speak for himself?" And Dogmar, being as awesome as he is, speaks for himself. And because he's so awesome, you look awesome. Now, in the midst of this, right, you realize you forgot to tell your friends where Dogmar was from. And you're like, "Oh, hey, Dogmar's from such and such a place," right? And now because he's foreign, he's exotic. And that makes you look even more cool. But what does Dogmar have to do with your quote integration? Just about everything. You're going to notice, okay, that in these examples, what I do here is, just like with Dogmar, when we bring our quotes to the party, we have to introduce them with why we brought them in the first place. That's what all of this black is up here. We then have to let the quotes speak for themselves, but we can't let them speak too much because if Dogmar comes off as cooler than me, he's leaving tonight. I need to make sure that I get all the street cred for this. So because of that, I got to make sure that he speaks enough to sound awesome, but I get to still have that last word. So sure enough, we just get a couple words in. That's what this red is here. And then at the very end, like I said, we have to remember, we got to tell people where Dogmar is from. That's what our citation is right here. So if you could think about bringing your friend Dogmar to a party, right? That's the same exact thing as what we're doing with quotes, okay? We're bringing something foreign into somewhere where it's not necessarily supposed to be, but it's going to fit in just fine. We then introduce why it's there, we let it speak, and then we make sure people know where it's from, just like we would do for any friend that we're bringing to a party. Anyway, that's how you want to take care of quote integration. It's the quickest, easiest way that I can think of to do so. And the examples, once again, can be found in the document below this video. As always, I appreciate the support of the Garden of English. Like us on Instagram. Feel free to pick up a shirt, anything of that nature. But also remember, as I always say, these videos are free, and I hope that they're helpful as we start winding down the year. And you all have a great day.